And I think we're on. So, hello and welcome to Two Feathers Indigenous Speaker Series. It is a tremendous honor to have Chief Judge Abby from the Yurok Tribal Court and Chief Leona Colegrove from the Hoopa Tribal Court today with us. My name is Teresina Obi. I'm a Yurok Tribal member and serve as a culture coordinator and prevention specialist at Two Feathers. With me today, we have Amada Lang.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Lang, and I'm a local Karuk native and Native youth mentor for Two Feathers. Thank you, both Judge Abinanti and Colegrove, for joining us today. I also want to thank the viewing audience for tuning in today. We hope that this discussion can help the community watching learn a little bit more about tribal values and how they shape our courts within our Native justice system today. And Teresina will start us off with introductions on each of the chief judges.
We have the Honorable Judge Abby. She was born in San Francisco, California, and raised on the Yurok Indian Reservation. Judge Abby is the Chief Judge of the Tribal Court in Klamath. She was appointed to the bench in 2007. Judge Abby earned a bachelor's degree from Humboldt State College. She then received a JD from the University of New Mexico School of Law. Prior to her appointment to the Yurok Tribal Court, Judge Abby served as a court commissioner for the Superior Court of San Francisco County. She was assigned to Unified Family Court. She retired from this position in 2011, but continued to serve to the city every other week to preside over cases. Judge Abby has also presided over Shoshone-Bannock Tribal Court, the Hopi Tribal Court, and the Colorado Indian River Tribal Court. She has also served as chief of the Court of Indian Offenses of the Hoopa Valley Indian Reservation. Judge Abby has served as the president of the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. Judge Abby incorporates Yurok approaches to conflict resolution in her courtroom. These approaches strive to involve everyone affected by an offense, relying on strategies that can simultaneously rehabilitate individuals while also providing justice. Rather than issuing fines or sentences, she has asked defendants to propose their own forms of atonement. Judge Abby is the first Indigenous woman in California to be admitted to California State Bar.
Awesome. And the Honorable Judge Leona Colegrove earned her Juris Doctorate from the University of Washington School of Law with a concentration in alternative dispute resolution in 2000. In addition to sitting on the Tulip Tribal Court bench, she is also the chief judge for both her own tribe in Hoopa, California, and the Elk Valley Rancheria in Northern California. Judge Colegrove is an enrolled member of the Hoopa tribe and also descends from the Quinault tribe, and she began her judicial work in both tribal and state courts in 2006. She has an extensive experience hearing child welfare and family law matters. In addition to her judicial work, Judge Colegrove is an active attorney and has litigated Indian child welfare matters in both tribal and state courts. Judge Colegrove has written numerous articles to assist tribes in protecting and providing services to Indian children in the child welfare system. She was the first Indian judge to sit on the Washington State Supreme Court Commission on Children in Foster Care. She held positions on the Washington State Tribal Court Judges Association Governing Board, as well as the National American Indian Court Judges Association Executive Board. Judge Colegrove developed the first Quinault Wellness Court in 2010 in an effort to move the Quinault judicial system toward a restorative approach to justice. She went on to do the same for the Quinault tribe by establishing the first Quinault Wellness Court in 2012. As chief judge of her own tribe, she was instrumental in establishing one of the first joint jurisdiction family wellness courts in the country. One of her accomplishments she is most proud of is to have the honor of calling Brycelyn and Olivia her daughters.
Great, you're both on your honors. It is a tremendous just opportunity to be here with you both today because, you know, just Judge Abby, our work together at my time with the Yurok tribe, I've learned a tremendous amount from you, just both professionally and personally. So thank you for being here. And Judge Colegrove, you know, just any opportunity to service the community, to work with youth, you've always jumped on the request, whether it was Acorn Camp in Hoopa, you know, and our opportunity today to be here. So thank you both for being here.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresina, as well. And I just want to remind the audience very quickly, at the end of this little speaker series, we're going to ask the audience to give us any questions for the chief judges. And so throughout this, you guys can please just be adding questions along. And towards the end, we will be answering those and asking the chief judges those as well. So please, again, be doing this throughout the video. That'd be awesome. And to start us off, my first question is for Judge Abby. Judge Abby, I would like to just kind of get a little bit inside from the very beginning, kind of how it all started. What drew you to law, and what steps did you take to kind of achieve those goals?
Well, I wish I had some really impressive path, but the truth of the matter was I was getting ready to graduate from Humboldt State. And at that time, I was good friends with Tripp and old Lena McCovey. And they called me in and they said, "Oh, what do you think about going to law school?" And I said, "I haven't thought about it at all." They said, "Well, we think it'd be a really good idea." I said, "Well, then you guys can go," and then we proceeded to get in this half-hour-long argument. And I don't know if any of you remember them, but you don't win too many arguments with them. And so here I am. They said, basically, there's a scholarship. You're the only one graduating. You're going. So it wasn't that I had this lifelong goal to be a lawyer. It was really, I didn't have enough guts to walk away from two mad old ladies. So I just did it. And in the end, they were right. I came to it, and it's been good, and I'm glad that I did it, but I can't say that it was some brilliant idea I had or some drive that I had. It was just, they saw that opportunity and they said, "You're it. So have a nice time."
Do you feel that it was a huge motivating factor that kind of set you on your course, at least to where you are today?
Well, I mean, they made the decision. I went. I'd never been away from home, and I was in New Mexico. I didn't have any money, and I didn't know how to get home. And I would call home crying once in a while, and they would just say, "Oh, for crying out loud, you'll be home in time for dance. Just stop it," And so I did, and it went from there. But and I'm not unhappy with it, and I don't feel wronged in any way. They saw something I never saw because it wasn't something I was exposed to. I would never have considered it because at that point there were really no tribal lawyers. It was nothing that any of us would have thought of as a possibility. They saw it as a possible, and they said, "Okay, you're graduating. It's a scholarship. It won't cost you. Go."
They almost saw it as a paved way to make you a leader yourself, almost in your own. Because you were stating there's not very other leaders to follow too, so that's actually really interesting. Thank you. And Judge Colegrove, I would also like to ask you maybe just to give us a little summary into your career in law and how you started on your path.
So unlike Abby, I knew my earliest memory was about fourth grade, and I grew up in my community as well. And in addition to being a Colegrove, I'm a Capoman. And anybody who's taken Indian Law 101 has read the case of Squire versus Capoman. And it's a staple case that we all learn in our first year of law school. And if we're studying Indian law. And basically the Capoman in that case was my uncle, which was my grandmother's brother. And so I grew up every Sunday after church. I grew up in the 1910 Indian Shaker Church, and every Sunday after church, we would go to visit my uncle. And I would hear him and all of our other elders talk about Indigenous rights and how important it was to take care of our people. And so that's just the environment that I grew up in. And, I always felt like that being an attorney was going to be the best way that I could represent my community and help. Unfortunately, I don't know if I didn't listen good enough, but I always thought that if we were on the right side of things, we could win. And I came to find out that wasn't always the case, but nevertheless, it's definitely always worth fighting for.
Right.
That's really inspiring. Thank you. I'm not in the law school familiar with that, but I will definitely look into that law case because I've done some Native studies as well, and so that's very interesting to me. So thank you. And also, I want to kick it back to Judge Abby. I was wondering if you can kind of just give me, you kind of gave me a little bit brief summary in your career in law, but maybe give me kind of a summary of where you are now working with the tribes and such.
Well, primarily I work here at home and trying to set up an infrastructure, and it's really, you know, the tribes are in a difficult position because all of the assistance that we get or can get comes with a certain mindset. And so you have to take that and then you have to recreate it and revision it so that, for instance, the system that Judge Colegrove and I learned about is very rights-based. You have a right to this, you have a right to that, you have this, that. Well, our cultures are very responsibility-based, and that's a very opposite concept, you know. And I often say to audiences, to tribal audiences, you know, you try saying to your grandmother you have a right to remain silent, and I'll be happy to help you sew your head back on, you know, because that's not going to work. If they ask you something, you will answer, you know, and they're not asking it for practice, you know, and they expect you to take responsibility for what you've done and to make it right if you've done wrong. They don't expect you to be perfect, but they expect you to take responsibility. And that's a whole different system. And for a lot of us, it's really interesting because when I first came home, you know, there was talk about the trial or this or trial that. But then if you get a whole room full of Native people and you say, do you want a trial or do you want to just talk about this and try to fix it? Probably 99 out of 100 are going to go, oh, let's just talk about it. So that just instinctively, that's what people will go to. You know, so there's a lot more culture asleep in people than people realize, you know, and that by what they think is an individual preference is really a cultural preference. You know, and that takes a while to get used to. So then you have to organize that and create that into an infrastructure. So what you're looking at is, here's a value system. How do you develop practices out of that value system? You know, and when you do, frankly, they're going to look differently than the state and federal systems because their value system is different. It's rights-based. Our value system is different. It's value-based, is really on responsibility. You know, and that's the heavy lesson that we all took from how we were raised, is responsibility, you know.
Thank you for that. I like that idea of not for just taking responsibility of your actions, not the right or the wrong or who did this. It's just really owning up and taking responsibility, as well as the individual versus culture, I think is huge within the Native courts today. And a little bit, my siblings were they got adopted through my grandmother, and we use the tribes as well. So I have a little bit of a connection to it, but I definitely thank you for that. And Judge Colegrove, maybe give us, the audience viewing, a little bit of an insight of where you are today working for the tribes.
So I still dabble a little bit in the law. I always kind of try to keep doing that to some extent, but I'm a judge both in Hoopa, and I'm still a judge in Washington State as well for the Tuareg tribes on a part-time basis. And I really take the same approach that Abby was talking about, a really restorative, a more restorative approach. I think the court systems that were sort of placed upon us are so foreign from the way that we look at justice and the way that we administer justice traditionally as people, that we've really struggled to sort of make that system fit in our culture. And as a result of that, I've made it my goal in my career as a judge to try to tailor the system that was imposed upon us to the needs of the community that I'm working in. And that can be difficult sometimes because it takes a lot more energy and a lot more investment than somebody just putting on a robe and getting on a bench. I think judges like Abby and I, we really have a bigger responsibility, I believe, to the communities that we work in. Like, we really have to develop rapport. We're more than just judges. We are cheerleaders for our court system. We're advocates for our communities and the work that we do. And we're constantly growing and evolving our court systems to meet the needs of our communities. And so that's sort of how I view myself and the work that I do. And you know, it can be taxing at times, but I think in the end, when you see the baby steps and the small results, it really is worth it, because you see the difference that it makes in the lives of the people that you work with and the communities that you're working in.
Thank you for that. That was amazing, both of you, just hearing about your restorative approach and, you know, tailoring the needs to the community that which you serve. And that kind of leads into one of my questions, is that within the tribal courts, like, how do you incorporate our tribal values such as culture, language, ceremonial practices into your operations and decision-making process within the court? So, Judge Abby?
Well, I mean, I think it depends a lot on the specific case. And we also do a lot of things around wellness, where we will have as part of somebody's wellness, when we're having dance, to go to camp, to go with the wellness worker. I'll assign wellness workers to go with clients to spend, you know, the days at dance, to help their students do their homework packages, to make sure that they do them. You know, we had a dispute. Two guys were going at it over a fishing hole. And so I issued restraining orders because they were getting violent with each other, and they came in, and I was like, you know, I don't know what you two knuckleheads are thinking. I said, I issued these restraining orders because if I didn't, you might really, you know, one of you is going to kill the other, which I can't fix. I said, you both know better, and you both know you should have went to this particular leader and had a discussion and resolve this. I happen to have him standing here. So you have a choice right now. You guys, you three men can walk out of here and resolve this and, you know, come back in, which is what you should have done. Wait here. And I'll tell you right now, if you come back in here and it's not resolved, you're going to face one mad old Yurok woman. About it really carefully. You know, about an hour and a half later, they came in, they knocked on the door, they were all laughing and happy. And I mean, I have no idea what they did. And I said, you guys, you go out and you tell your families how you did this, because this is something you forgot and you know better than to do this. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm done. And that was it. So I don't know what the issue was, but I didn't need to know. You know, and we have an associate judge now. And I said to him, you know, our men, we have very gender specific culture. Our men used to spend every night in the sweat lodges talking. I said, probably just gossiping. I don't know what you guys were doing out there. I don't really need to know. But I said, you know, you did it for thousands of years, so something was happening. So maybe we need to recreate that and bring it forward. So he's starting on working on those kinds of groups. I said, and once again, I don't need to know. I just need you to do whatever you guys do out there and be responsible, you know? So I said, there was a reason we did it that way. And it served us well for a very long time. And not doing it has not served us well. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about it. I said, but it's men's business. Go do it, you know? And so creating time and space for things like that, you know, I think is really, really important, you know, and because whenever you have a break in an evolution, you know, we didn't get a chance to evolve because we had this horrible invasion and we had these horrible things happen. And so it caused a break, a gap, you know, but it didn't, those feelings and those thoughts are still there and they can come forward. And now the natural evolution didn't happen, you know, because those places were destroyed. That place in culture and in the day was destroyed. So now you have to recreate that and let it be what it's going to be, because it would have evolved. Nothing stays the same. I mean, it just isn't the nature of humans to stay the same. We all evolve. You know, you would take the time and space to let that happen. I guess
Yeah. So yeah, that growth and that development, evolving that you're talking about of restorative justice, and how, from that example that you shared, it shows the mediation and negotiation between both parties and how they were able to bring that to you and settle that dispute. So thank you. Similarly, Judge Colegrove, how do you incorporate the tribal values into your operations and decision making?
So the overall approach that I take is to really, if you look at the system that was imposed upon us, it's a very vertical approach to justice. So it's the judge sitting on the bench at the top, administering justice down to everyone else. And what they say is the last word, and that's pretty much it. And that's so foreign to us because in our culture, justice is administered on a very horizontal level, right? Like Judge Abby was talking about. We have responsibility to the community, and that's really the approach that we take. So it's a lot more effective to bring someone in front of their relatives, their elders, and have their elder say to them, "I'm really ashamed of you. This is not who we raised. We don't know who the person was that did this, but this is not the person that we raised in our community." And that's way more effective than some judge in a robe who doesn't even know the person saying, "You did this bad deed and we're going to give you 5 days in jail." They'll go do the 5 days and then they'll probably go do it again. But I'll tell you, they'll think twice before they do it again after they've been admonished by their auntie or their grandma.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just so I take that approach and I apply it to pretty much everything that I do. And that's not just on the bench, it's everything. So every court that I work in, I've always established what's called the Judicial Project Advisory Team. And that's just a fancy word for saying, everybody come in, anybody who has a stake in the judicial process, in the judicial system, anybody and everybody. If you are welcome to come and talk to us about what works and what doesn't work in our system. And let's continually and habitually improve our system and make it work better for our community. And so that's really the first step. And then everything that we do sprouts from there. And in whether it's assessments, whether it's strategic planning, we make sure that we involve the community in every aspect, on a cultural level, on a leadership level. I mean, the community is first and foremost involved, so that nothing is being developed from the top down. It's always a horizontal process. And so really great things happen as a result of that. Like the Family Wellness Court, we now have an advocate that works with our families who really incorporates culture and makes sure that our families are receiving whatever they need on the cultural side, and just generally what they need out of our community. And they're receiving services in the Valley that they might not normally have access to. If, for example, they have only a caseworker out in Humboldt County who wouldn't know that there are certain services available in our community. So, and it's just, as a result of that, you get this synergy, this process where, your whole community is working together, and you're able to develop things that you wouldn't have normally. And so that's really my approach to involving our culture and our community.
Thank you for that. And just the hearing is the responsibility to community is so inspirational, and the very critical steps that you take in making that process happen. So such as the Family Court Advocate or the Judicial Project Advisory Team, I believe you called it. And so that is truly inspiring. And that kind of leads into our next question, which is can you differentiate between the tribal court and the evolution of the joint jurisdiction in the process of that? Judge Abby?
Yeah, I want to go back to Judge Colegrove. It's really important. You know, in many ways, working in the tribal court is so much more comforting and in many ways easy. I like it here. But she spends a certain amount of time still wrestling, basically mud wrestling in the other system. We are tremendously disadvantaged in courts. And I think a point has to be made about that. The fight there is not over and it's not easy. And you have to accept getting your brains beat out because it's the right thing to do, to stand up next to your, you know, to your cousin, to whoever, because they have nobody. You know, I don't do it anymore. And I just want to give her kudos for doing that and for saying it, because it's really, really important that that happens. Because earlier in my career, I saw that how many times they, you know, we would be there with nobody standing next to us, nobody caring, nobody knowing where we came from or what it meant or how people were going to feel when we disappeared for the rest of our lives over something we did not do, you know, and that's really hard. And it's hard work. And I just wanted to put that out there. So back to, so you had a question now, which is, I lost in thinking about what
Thank you for adding to that, Judge. And just, you know, as strong Indigenous women, having such a pristine position too, we sometimes forget that piece that you're talking about working with family and those relationships. And so, again, a tremendous thank you. To the question that was asked before, was how do you differentiate in tribal court, like the tribal court process and the evolution of the joint jurisdiction,
Well,
how that came to be?
it's funny because they're starting to look more like us than we're looking like them. And that's what the evolution is about. You know, the judges come down off the bench and sit at a table with clients now, which they would never have done before, I don't think, in the way that they do it now. You know, one of our judges actually has a walking group with women you know, that appear before her. She goes to they have, what's really nice is they've become peers, the clients, because it's a peer court where they all appear together. So they'll have events like around the holidays, and we go to their events and they have things that they do. So I think one of the biggest achievements that we really have out of that is that we created these joint jurisdiction courts where usually in dependency court where kids get adopted and whatever, you meet every 6 months. Our court meets every 2 weeks. And one of the big things that we can be proud of is they create a family wellness court for non-natives now in that county.
Wow.
And they're using our approach in that court, you know, and to me, and they're using it because it works better. You know, it isn't, yes, we have some very unique things about us, but they seem to, in many ways, have forgotten that they're dealing with humans too. You know, those humans have feelings, they have these things that they can do. And I think for us, that's a gift we gave them. I don't know that they would ever have figured that out. You know, we could go up to them and get in a big old arm wrestling contest about it, but all of a sudden they have a court like that now. You know, and I'm like, yeah, okay, you know.
Oh, I didn't know that about.
Many people who came here came with cultures, you know, and they forgot about that. The whole thing about let's have a melting pot, you know, that was one of their less bright ideas, you know, and they've got a lot of them, but that's right up there at the top. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Judge Colegrove, similarly, can you differentiate between tribal court and what you're doing in Hoopa and the evolution of joint jurisdiction thus far?
So I was really excited about the joint jurisdiction court because when I was elected in Hoopa, I was really shocked and really disappointed to find that we were not exerting jurisdiction, not over one single one of our children. And that was heartbreaking to me. And it frustrated me. It made me angry. I wanted to know where our kids were, what was going on with them, why we were not exerting jurisdiction. And so this was an immediate solution in my mind, because they had our kids, and if they were willing to share jurisdiction over them, then I was willing to, of course, engage if that was a way to have access.
Mhm.
And it is, and it has been, it's been slow moving, and getting families filtered in, because we only take in new cases. The older cases don't generally come into the family wellness court. But it's an opportunity for our court and all of the services that we are able to provide to be engaged with the family, and that we didn't have before. And what's happened is, when cases actually come over, the tribal court and our services end up having, in my opinion, a much larger role than the county does. In fact, when we run hearings, even though technically the county still has the jurisdiction, we're sort of partnering, and they have the technical jurisdiction. They're allowing us to have this partnership, but generally, I run the hearings. I don't know if that's your experience, Abby. The state court judge generally just sort of sits back and listens, and they let us sort of manage the ship, and they're very respectful about how we see the vision of the cases. They really listen and work with us as a team and assist us. And to me, it's really the best of both worlds, especially in California, where it's a public law 280 state. This was another shock to me, so in Washington, when cases would transfer from state court to tribal court, the state still had an obligation to provide services, financially, to provide services. And so that was really important, especially in high needs cases. Well, in California, that's not the way it works. If cases transfer from state court to tribal court, the state washes their hands of the cases, and the tribe is on the hook financially, which is why it's very difficult for a lot of tribes that are financially strapped to be able to maintain jurisdiction and assert jurisdiction over their children, because they don't have the wherewithal and the finances, especially if they're special needs families and cases. And so when we join this joint jurisdiction court, the state is our partner, and we have all the say, and we have all of the resources. And so you're doubling the resource. They have the best of both worlds. It is a win-win situation, and the state is happy to have our assistance, because we are making differences. Like Abby said, it works. It works. The system currently in place does not work. It's broken. It's not helpful to our families. Our families don't reunite generally, and our kids come out of the system broken and harmed. And so we have to come up with a solution. And to me, I can't say enough I think this is going to be the future. It's cutting edge. And Abby doesn't say highly enough about herself. She's the one that really started this in California. They worked with Humboldt County to develop this grant. I came in after the fact, but I think it's phenomenal work. Abby and I get asked to speak about this topic all over the country now, because there's probably just a tiny handful of these courts across the country. So I think it's the future, and I think the future looks bright.
Thank you for that. That was extremely powerful when you said that their system is broken, but our system works, and how really coming together to collaborate those resources and other avenues for the betterment of our people. And I think this really speaks to our audiences and how really, like, you guys the court is here to help serve the people, and the resources are there. So don't be afraid to approach this and ask for help, and to continue to reach out in a more ease way, if that makes sense, because we have the opportunity to be with both of you here today. So thank you.
And I wanted to go ahead and kind of bring it back a little bit. just kind of the whole, this was like a healing I felt for me just hearing that, and within the tribal courts itself. And you guys are both a force to be reckoned with, I think, with the investment you have done within your tribal communities as well as your communities back home. It sounds like you're going back to Washington too, and just making it Judge Colegrove within both, which I believe just hearing you talk right now is tremendous. And I want to kick it back to Judge Abby. What are your next aspirations and the future for the tribal court do you see? Kind of going off of Colegrove too, she was saying you're a big leader for this, and I just would like to hear your insight on that.
Well, I think we have to strengthen our infrastructure, strengthen our ability to reach out to people. You know, systems don't help people, people help people. And you've got to have people who are willing to do that. You know, I got through every difficult time in my life because of somebody else helping me. I didn't just wake up and run through it because I'm faster than everybody else. You know, that's not how it happens. You know, you have to reach out, people come and they help you, you know, and we have to remember that's who we are and how we are, and make a system like that. You know, and Teresina was talking about the foster care system, and she knows a lot about it because she's worked in it. And, you know, I said to a group of leaders in San Francisco at a talk this last year, you know, about foster care. We have a lot of children in foster care. And if you interview trafficked children, 77% of those children say that they were in foster care. That's what they have in common. And I said, anybody else who had those kind of numbers would be called pimps. They would not be allowed to get away with this. And we have a disproportionately high number of children in there. And I agree with Judge Colegrove. It's our responsibility to get every one of them back. You know, and we have not moved as fast as I've wanted to. We haven't done Title IV as fast as I want to. We haven't helped the parents. To me, that's the area I'm looking at. I'm looking at that area to achieve more results. And the missing and murdered women is the same thing. We can have our people taken and not cared about in that fashion, you know, and it's our responsibility. If we're a justice system, then we have to work toward justice. And you can't, the children are being hurt, and they're being hurt in foster care, you know, and we're the grownups. We have to do something. We absolutely have to do something, you know, and it's surprisingly difficult to get a true systematic response to that, because it's very hard to raise the funds to create that kind of infrastructure and to create that kind of support. You know, and people talk a lot about historical trauma, but they don't realize that we've had, California was, and a lot of natives from the rest of the country don't realize that California was horribly assaulted more than any other area, you know, and up here we've had massacres, we've had the boarding schools, we had the indentured slave movement. You know, all of the indentured slaves that came out of California came out of the North. That means us, our relatives, you know, and nobody acknowledges that. And if you're raised as a slave, and we were horrible slaves because we ran away and came home. The problem was we were parented in that way. And parenting is the thing you learn from being parented. You know, so all of this stuff came with us, and we have to help, and we have to acknowledge that. You know, and in our batterer intervention program, we work on, look, you did this, but do you know why you did it? Because it's really hard to stop something if you don't know why you're doing it. You know, they feel like they're getting mugged because they don't want to be that kind of person for the most part. You know, and it's like they don't know when they wake up in the morning that that's how the day is going to end, because they don't know what happened to them before they had the words. You know, and what the people who interacted with them did, sometimes their own families, and they didn't have the words, you know, and that's problematic. And so for the future, that's what we've got to put an end to. And the work you're doing, you know, in recreation and those kinds of things, we have to get back who we are, you know, and give that to our children. That's the only way out of this situation that I see. You know, you can learn, you can do whatever, but grown-ups have an obligation, and their first obligation is to children and to elders. And you've got to do that. If you don't do it, what kind of human being are you? You know, and you can be a judge, you can be a lawyer, you can be whatever, but that's your responsibility.
Thank you, Judge Abby. And I don't like to keep bringing it back to me, but I was a former foster youth, so I resonate with that a lot in the sense. And we went through all of the systems with what is set up through the courts. And so luckily for our situation, it's helped in the sense. So you can at least, that's one positive, is you could look at me and say that's a good positive with some of the systems that have helped. But that's also kind of what you're saying with recreation. And I've been trying to find a way to stem back to that. So thank you very much. And I really I like the whole people help people, not systems, because that's one huge thing with why I'm a mentor, why Two Feathers is doing a lot of the services today. So thank you for that. Judge Colegrove, I just wanted to see what you kind of touched on it a little bit, but maybe a little bit more specific on what your aspirations are for the future in the tribal court as well.
So specifically, we are working on a project right now to address the high rates of absentee truancy in the school district. So in our school district, in the joint Trinity Klamath School District, the rate of truancy hovers around 50%, and while the rate in the state of California averages around 30%. So it's really, really high, and something needs to be done, and nothing is being done. And so, and it's my experience that if you look at rates of truancy and issues with school, and that there's correlation between that and family issues that result in court involvement. And so if you can get upstream, if you will, and address those issues while they're at the truancy level, then you might not have such big issues downstream. And so that's the goal right now. And we're working with the school district and the county to develop sort of the same joint jurisdiction type approach with an eye on community involvement, cultural involvement, to identify what are the issues that families are facing, whether it's transportation, whether there's domestic violence in the home, what are the root issues of why your children are not going to school, and then throw services at them, figure out what we need to do to fix the problem. And right now, none of that's happening. So we're working hard to put together a structure to be able to do that and provide those services and fix the problem, to be able to work upstream and hopefully avoid, longer term problems downstream.
The idea of working upstream so it doesn't affect that's a perfect, I love that metaphor. I think just in general, being able to stop it before it's in its tracks, really. And I think working as a mentor too, a lot of that, I can agree to that, a lot of the truancy and having kids attend school and stemming into the family trauma and it all connects, and it definitely needs to be looked at. And even with me, I think with some of my friends, Native youth growing up, it's always been like, we keep our grades up for some of my friends that I was in the friend group, but it's hard. And but I'm glad Two Feathers provides that opportunity, and you're providing, it's awesome you're doing this for the community as a whole. So thank you.
Well, we spend so much time putting out fires. We sort of get used to that, and we're not used to trying to source the start of the fire. Like where do they begin? And I think we really have to start looking at those issues, because like Judge Abby said, people don't understand. I mean, they get where they are at any given moment, but they don't necessarily understand how they got there. So it's up to us to try to start helping people to realize how you got there. Like, let's start opening Pandora's box and and helping people to realize and recognize and get the resources they need to not get downstream.
Mhm.
Yeah, because you learn the behavior, and that's what's wrong. I mean, when I was in school, which admittedly was a very long time ago, I didn't go to school for months on end. That was my career. By the time I was in 7th and 8th grade, I would be home 2 or 3 months of the year, and nobody was really paying attention. I wasn't running around. I wasn't in school. And the reason I wasn't in school was because my mom really didn't know how to advocate for me in an environment that had a lot of negatives. And I didn't realize till I was grown, and I came home one day and heard her and her sisters arguing about, because she was the youngest, about how she got them in trouble for crying around at boarding school and sneaking into their dorms at night, because she'd never been without her sisters. And I said, and keep in mind, all the time I was cutting school, I was home. I said, I didn't know you guys went to boarding schools. And 3 heads snapped around and said, we're not talking to you. That's the whole thing I know about their boarding school experience. And I grew up, I have a daughter, I'm traveling and I'm taking her with me. And about halfway through kindergarten, I went, what do you think you're doing? How do you think this is going to end? But that was okay, because that's, if I hadn't, for some reason, it tripped in my mind what I was doing, and my mom wasn't doing it maliciously. She, one time I remember she got dressed up and she went to the school when this really nasty teacher was going to hold me back a year so she could be vindictive for another year, and my mother stood up for me that day. And I remember it very clearly because it never happened before or after that. It took everything she had to do it that one time, and that people don't understand. That is where that behavior comes from. I mean, I didn't understand it, and I was in the middle of it.
This was amazing, just how you both are tying so many different components to our way of life, when the systems that such as boarding school era, the missing murdered Indigenous women, to working upstream. These are so many different components that affect our communities and that affect our people, and that really the work that Tribal Court is doing to expand and outsource and really look to the community for healing within itself, and how that role is incorporated with your Western teachings, but at the basis and foundation of it is the cultural teachings and commitment to your community. So thank you very, very much for that. This is truly inspiring to hear, because we don't often hear too much about, the murder missing Indigenous women, and we don't hear too much about like the uphill battle it is working both systems, but you're sharing today how elegantly you both work within those systems to maintain for the tribal community. So thank you. I had the opportunity to meet Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg of the Supreme Court, and she said, fight for the things that you care about and do it in a way that others will join you. So thus far in your careers, in what ways has your passion influenced your contribution to the tribal community? Judge Abby.
I think going back again to that what I really learned early was you don't give up. It isn't necessary that you win, but you don't quit. And that lesson I took, because I can't tell you how many times I stood up in court and lost, but I stood up, and I stood up next to people who would have had nobody who cared, and I think that kind of thing. And, every night when she and I are thinking about all those foster kids that we haven't helped, we know we have to get up and do it again, and that's the thing, is that you can't, you put here, you have a purpose, and you do your purpose, and you don't quit. You don't quit on yourself, and you don't quit on others. And that's how it works. And, she was raised, I was raised to fight, and that's it. And this is the way of doing it. This is the way of being a warrior at this time. You don't turn your back, and you remember them, and you remember, and you remember how hard it is. I remember a person here who died, who had really tried very hard to overcome their drinking issue. And I saw them and I walked up to them and they were clearly intoxicated. And I said, don't worry, we'll try again tomorrow. We'll try again tomorrow. You can come tomorrow and see me. And, I love you. And I got back in my car. And that night she killed herself. And I thought, I'm glad that that's the last thing I said to her. I didn't judge her. I didn't because it is so much harder to be her and to try and try and try when you're like that. And that's the people you have to remember. And they didn't want it to be that way. They never wanted it to be that way. And I think that's what people forget. And it's not like, oh, they're just doing that or they're this or they're that. They never wanted it to be that way. That is not their purpose. They didn't come here to do that.
Thank you. That was amazing. Just how you don't give up. You always, you wake up and you give back to your community and, you live to fight another day. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing the story of the woman you worked with. And those are your last words and how impactful that was to her, even though her, her decision was her final call. But at the same time, that love and passion for your people. Thank you. Similarly, Judge Colegrove, how has your passion influenced your contribution to the tribal community?
So like Judge Abby was hitting on, we work with basically the most vulnerable populations in our community, which, let's just face it, our communities are one of the most vulnerable populations in the country as it is. And then among those, we're working with the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable. And so every day we're faced with dealing with situations and individuals who have no voice. Neglected children have no voice in our communities, unfortunately. Elders who are being abused have no voice in our communities. And so it's up to people that do have a voice, like Judge Abby and I, and you too, to actually give those people voices and to give those individual voices. And so that's really how what has been the guiding principle in my career. I've had conversations with a good colleague of mine, Gabe Galanda, who has his own law firm, Galanda Broadman, who fights on behalf of rights of tribal members who have been disenrolled. And we talk about the work that we do and how exhausting it can be sometimes to not have the support of our larger community behind us for such important work. And it always ends the same way with, if not us, then who? If not us, then who?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It inspires me just being like, I'm being able to do this with the speaker series and have an opportunity to interview you guys, as well as just different leaders. And this is very insightful for my work in the future. And I'm just getting thrown into a master's program, so this is going to be awesome. I kind of wanted to bring it back a little bit with what's going on right now with everybody in the world with the COVID-19 kind of happening. Judge Abby, with given the coronavirus epidemic, what are some ways do you feel that the tribal court is having to adjust during this time?
Well, I might end up learning how to actually Zoom, for instance. There's a lot of debate about whether I can learn something like that. I think, we have a very active, efficient Chief Executive Officer, Jessica Carter, who is a powerhouse. She came home, she is committed. The day that we had the closure order, we had home offices set up, we had schedules, we had tasks, we had rules, we had a schedule for when you can come in this building or not. We had all the rules laid out. We knew what we were going to do virtually. We had, stuff that I don't frankly understand in the least. set up to how we were going to do all the virtual hearings. And we have had 1 week we did 82 hearings. All I have to do is sit there. They do, they know what they're doing, and she has trained them to do it. And it's not as, I don't think it's as good as being in the same room with people, but they know that we haven't forgotten them, that we're there. Call us if you need us. All the stuff, all our phones are forwarded to our civil access center. So we're still, getting calls for help, and we're responding to those calls. We have filing systems. We have all of those things that are there. We're still communicating on a daily basis with clients and moving forward on new initiatives, trying to say, like Judge Colegrove was saying about the schools, if we don't put a stop to this truancy thing, we might as well just jump off the bridge. I mean, you cannot run our nations with 11-year-old dropouts. It's not possible anymore. You can't do it. And that's the bottom line. And it's just too complicated. And those things that we're adjusting to, so we're providing services, we're still applying for grants. We're getting ready to open new services as soon as we can. And we're operational, and she created that vision, and we needed like 2 or 3 different printers, and they were delivered. Probably Amazon's afraid of her, I don't know, but she got them delivered, and that's all those things that you need are in place, and it's done, and there's an expectation that we will continue to do it. And we've had hearings every week, and we will continue to have them,
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Abby.
I was going to say, all you have to do as a judge is what your clerks tell you, and your CEO. It's easier that way. You hire them, they're good, then you just do what they tell you.
We've kind of been in the same little bit of a working schedule too. We have one, shout out to Shay, she's our head lady doing all of our kind of figuring it out at Two Feathers, and it's kind of given us opportunities though to start new projects too for the youth, is what you're saying. So I will definitely keep in mind with this truancy thing, and kind of maybe bringing that back to Two Feathers and saying that was a big factor for a lot of the youth today. With the 11-year-old dropouts is really harsh, but I feel like that's huge. That's like straightforward, and it's true. We got to run these worlds with leaders and show them what it is to be a leader.
And they can do it. We have smart children. That's what's so maddening, and they're being looked over or ignored. They can so do it, they really can. Be different if we had a pool of people who couldn't, but that's not what we have.
Thank you for that. No, that needs to, I 100% agree with that. And one of my siblings is kind of dealing with that too right now. So it's nice to have these insights as well. Judge Colegrove, could you maybe give us some of how you're adjusting to this whole COVID-19 and tribal courts and how you're working it all out?
So I would just kind of reiterate what Judge Abby's indicated. We really rely heavily on our staff, and I'm of the philosophy that if you take care of your staff, they're going to take care of you and the community, and that's the philosophy that we have at our court. And so we've just made sure that we're still providing services to our victims, making sure that people have access to forms and can easily get a protection order if they need to. As you probably have heard or are aware, incidents of domestic violence have increased around the country because people are locked in and stressed out and broke. And so we're cognizant of that and making sure that people have access to those types of services. We're making sure that people know that the courts, like Judge Abby said, are open and available to them if they need anything. And then we're providing guidance. We've issued standing orders so that people know what's going on at the court and how they gain access. We provide posts on Facebook and our webpage, just to make sure that people are staying informed they know, like Abby said, we're still here.
Thank you for that. Oh, sorry. Just to go back a little bit, Judge Colegrove, your passion and your emotion was so profoundly impactful. And I'm sure just, working with both of your positions as chief judges, like it's a tremendous amount that how much you take on from the community and hearing the family and the court cases, but it is so much more impactful, your contribution to the community. So thank you for that. And thank you for speaking out. Before we open it up to our Facebook comment section, is there anything else that you both would like to contribute before opening up for questions? Community questions, sorry.
I just really appreciate the venue and the opportunity. This is, I think, really phenomenal. When I did it on Facebook, I got a lot of good feedback. I mean, it's obvious that people were very interested in it. So I encourage you to do more things like this with other judges, and I think it's really helpful and informative.
Thank you. Judge Abby?
I agree. I'm good.
So Amada, can you look into the comments, please?
Yeah, there was actually one I came across for, I believe it was Judge Colegrove that talked about having the 2 weeks span go for the courts rather than the month. And so there was actually a question within here. Jessica asked, how hard is joint jurisdiction with counties and rural communities? Our state court is 80 miles away. So how do we collaborate with many miles between court being every 2 weeks?
So we're in a very similar situation. We are not close to the Humboldt County courts. We're over an hour, about an hour apart. And so what we just do everything electronically. Our hearings are held via Zoom, I believe it is, and the caseworkers all Zoom in, the other judge Zooms in, and then depending on where the client lives. So if the client is actually residing closer to the Humboldt County court, then they'll go to the Humboldt County court. But if they're residing in Hoopa, they'll come to my court. And so whatever's the most convenient for them, that's what it'll be. And then we just go to them basically. So it really works out.
Okay, so I hope that gives the insight, Jessica, if you're listening. But it sounds like a lot of it right now too with the COVID is just virtual too. So hopefully that could help in this process right now with trying to figure it out, since there's so many resources with having to be virtual right now.
Well, frankly, I mean, it helped. We were kind of one step ahead of the COVID because we were already, sort of virtual for that purpose because we're so rural.
Awesome. And there's another question from one of our clinicians, Molly from Two Feathers. She was wondering, it's a kind of a question geared for both of you chief judges. What advice or story from your guys' identity as a younger selves would you feel comfortable sharing with young Native girls today watching? Either one of you guys could go if you feel comfortable.
So I'll go first. So like Abby, I was not a really good student, which I think some people might find surprising since I went to one of the top 20 law schools in the country. I graduated high school with a 1.6 GPA, but it wasn't because I wasn't smart. It was really my circumstances. It was difficult growing up. My parents were divorced. I grew up poor, and I went to 8 different high schools growing up, kind of bouncing between homes. At one point in time, I worked in a nursing home, and I was walking home at 2 o'clock in the morning to try to make it to school the next day. Like it wasn't an ideal existence as a teenager. But in my mind, I always knew, like I said, from the time I was very young, what I was going to do with my life. And there wasn't anybody that was going to stand in my way. And I really believed in myself. And I think that was a result of the community that I was raised in. Like I said, I grew up going to the 1910 Indian Shaker Church, and I grew up around people who really fought for what they believed in. And so no matter what people told me, or, you know, the grades, or, you know, you're not going to become anything. Like, I just never owned that. I always knew that at the end of the day, I was going to graduate from high school, I was going to graduate from college, and I was going to go to law school. And I think I would just encourage young women and girls. I think there's one time I read an article that said that a study was done on for some reason, people that didn't succeed in their goals, and the vast majority of them were perfectionists. And I would just encourage young girls to not be perfectionists, and really accept and appreciate themselves for who they are and where they are, and believe in themselves and their dreams, because no matter what, you can always make what your dream is happen, no matter what other people think or believe.
Judge Abby, do you have any insight from just kind of growing up as a younger Native woman, and advice to younger selves?
Well, I think advice I got from my mother is very similar to what Judge Colegrove was saying was, and I remember it always, is that do not let other people's view of you become your view of you, because you will go nowhere. And you will be nothing, because that's what they think of you. And I went, whoa, you know, because she said that when I was very young. And she said, you're responsible for your own vision of who you can be. And if you accept their vision, then you will become what they think of you. And they don't think much of you. I was like, okay, that's pretty clear. And I think,
It's the self-confidence, it sounds like, for both of you, that it resonates a lot, just that self-determination and believing in yourself.
and a goal, you know, and knowing that you have responsibility. You know, if you can do it, then you must. You know, it's like being in a boat and going past somebody who's drowning. You don't just go, well, too bad. You know, you reach out, you know, and if you go past them, that's on you in a horrible way. You know.
Thank you. I think it's the harshness of this. I think it needs to be brought up because it's a lot of, I think that's how you get the confidence. That's kind of how I got my confidence as myself, was kind of when you get knocked down, but you have that confidence to kind of pull yourself back. And I think that's huge with Native youth today, with even just any of the situations they're going through, whether it's school, just self-confidence, or any of that. So thank you. I'll kick it back to Teresina. I believe she has something to say.
Thank you again, judges, for being here today with us. This has been so insightful, inspiring. It is truly an honor to be here with you. And we've gone through this ceremony this past hour, and just the wealth of knowledge that you have given and are going to continue to give to the communities. You both are strong, intelligent, beautiful women that live through example of your using your intelligence, of using your responsibility and, you know, your position and that to the tribal community. And, you know, your contribution to serve through justice and to serve through culture values is outstanding. So again, thank you. And thank you for the viewers joining us today on this journey. So, Maklau, thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We're good to go. Thank you.